Here we are with a man who probably needs no introduction, but nonetheless, John Rocco. Hello, how are you today?
I'm great.
Good, thank you. And thank you very much for coming by to talk to us 12 by 12 folks. As I said when we were talking earlier, I'm obviously just a huge fan of your work. I mean, when Blackout came out, it just blew my mind. For background for 12 by 12, we did actually meet in real life at the Southern Festival of Books. As a matter of fact, Susan Eady was there. She's the illustrator of my book, My Love for You is the Sun, and we were having a little soiree, and we invited you, and you guys said, oh, maybe, and then you guys ended up getting front row seats to Loretta Lynn at
the Grand Ole
Opry. At the Grand Ole Opry. You guys were like in the front row seat.
Eugene Yelchin, who was with me, was just out of his mind.
I bet.
How excited he was. And I was going just because of all of his excitement.
So. Well, that's good. That's a great experience. I mean, I was so excited for this book to come out, which is Blizzard. 12 by 12ers, if you haven't seen this, read this, get it, because it's amazing. What I loved about Blackout and what I also loved about Blizzard is I remember those times as a kid when the electricity went out or something happened,
right.
And it was like camping and it was all quiet and it was just magical. It seems like a common thread. Same thing with a big snowstorm. And so I wanted to first ask you what inspires you most in your writing and your illustrating?
You know, it's a good question, and sometimes you don't know what that common thread is in your work until someone points it out to you. And for me, you know, when I was approaching them, they weren't exactly the same story, but then in the end, you look at the two works and you kind of say, okay, these are about a family stuck in an unusual situation and how they cope with it and how they deal with it. For me, I always wanted to capture the sort of that magical element when you're a child and you're experiencing these things, and it's usually very different than when you're an adult.
Yes, it most definitely is.
But I know when I interviewed a lot of people about the Blackout experience, they had this reminiscent, this almost nostalgia. That was something that I really wanted to try to capture.
I think you absolutely nailed it. And what's great is that we're too connected in this world. How cool is that, though, that, you know, here we are talking about this magic, and then both of us have our bleeping and other things going on, and we really are so connected.
And yet not.
And yet not, exactly.
That's kind of an important theme for me, and I'm seeing just on a daily basis how, yes, we're becoming more interconnected via social media, but we're also becoming less and less connected as human beings in a real way. Mm-hmm. Human contact.
I think we had fairly similar childhoods in the sense that I grew up in northern Michigan. I remember blizzards like this one. I tell my kids, you know, I used to be able to go up on the roof and jump off, and, you know, your feet don't even touch the ground. It's just like landing in a big snowbank. And the experience of it as an adult, it's very funny that you say that, because when I read Blizzard, I was there, and you're hoping school's going to be canceled and you're stuck in the house for days. What my dad would do is he would hang these big thick wool blankets and build a fire in the living room, and we slept there and we brought, you know, dinner in there and everything. I'll tell you what, when you go and get on the toilet and when you go behind the blanket, so to speak, and whoo, I mean, I still remember what that kind of cold felt like. And my mom says to this day she still has a hard time with the smell of burning wood, because she was so crazy by the end of that winter. And my memories of it are like it was the best thing ever.
Right. And, you know, and I think that's the stuff we want to write about, too. Mm-hmm. And try to capture those feelings and those moments. We also grew up in a time that's very different from kids' experiences today, and I tried to capture that in the book. You know, I was 10 years old during that blizzard. And I don't think today someone would let their 10-year-old kid out the door to walk a mile in the snow.
I don't think so.
You know, with their sled by themselves. I mean, it just wouldn't happen. But my childhood was different. You know, at 11 years old, I worked on a commercial shellfishing boat every day. of every summer, and sometimes on the weekends through school.
Let's talk a little bit of craft. So you definitely have a desire, I think, this kind of simplicity.
And I don't want to be like, oh, when it was my childhood, it was so much better. It's just different, and I think children have a little more freedom, which is good. But I wanted them to also experience that freedom through a book. And so if they can't do it themselves, at least they can kind of go along with a character who did. I mean, look at Max. You know, he leaves his room and he goes to his own island and fools the monsters. And then when he's ready to come home, he comes home. And his dinner is still warm.
Hot.
So, you know, that's that sort of magical journey that children get to take, whether in real life or in books.
And did you have any inkling that this would end up being a Caldecott winner?
No, I mean, of course not. You know, it's a crapshoot. Let's be honest. You know, there are so many good books made every year. And you've got 15 librarians who work their butts off to figure out what are they going to say this is the most distinguished book of the year or not. And I think it's a really hard job after just recently being judge for the SCBWI Golden Kite.
Oh, yeah.
Going through that process and trying to figure that out. And I realized, wow, you know, it's not easy. You know, heck, 10 years ago, I didn't even know I was going to be making kids' books.
Well, that's pretty
cool. Totally different path. So,
what was your path before?
Well, I was working as an art director, and I was doing film, and I was doing theme parks, a lot of location-based entertainment stuff, and I really enjoyed it. But my wife, she kind of inspired me to get back to books. I had done a book a long, long time ago, and she was working on a book, and then she said, "You gotta come check out this SCBWI conference." And so I looked into it, and I was like, yeah, okay, let's go do it. And we went, and I was kind of done after that. I went to the conference, and after that weekend, I was like, okay, I know what I need to do now. And I started making more art, and then I went to the New York conference after that, and then we said, all right, well, it looks like we need to live here to do this, which is not true, but you kind of get that sense, and I had lived in New York before, my wife had not, and she wanted to go live there. And I was like, yeah, let's do it. And so we did. And breaking into the kids' book world is hard. And then doing it at 38, you know, like quit your job, and I'm like, I'm going to make books.
It's also inspiring because
rolling the dice.
A lot of us are in the same situation, you know.
Exactly. And I think also watching it and being sort of privy to a lot of people who haven't got their books made yet. I mean, there's some great stuff out there that hasn't been seen yet and hasn't, you know, come to the surface and been out there. So I'm very fortunate just to be able to make books, never mind getting stickers and stuff.
Right. No, I mean, but did you do anything when you were starting out that you felt was either unusual, or you look back on it now and think that was a turning point in terms of getting your books made? Never mind the stickers, but just, you know.
Well, I've got a very stubborn, this is what I'm going to do. God damn it. You know?
Right.
And I'm going to focus every ounce of my energy towards this goal. And I'm going to study whomever's work I have to study or read whatever books I have to read, and really gave myself a big education on it. Because when I did my first book very long time ago, 1991, and then I didn't do books for 15 years, you know, not only did the industry change, but my understanding of books changed too. So that was one big kind of thing that I think helped. The second thing, I think, and I think this really happened with Blackout. I mean, it's easy to look at it in hindsight and go, yeah, well, that won the Caldecott. So, of course, that was the big change book. But for me, it was understanding the actual physicality of the book and treating it less cinematically, as I had done in previous books, like Moon Powder and Who Finds the Way, and a little bit in Wolf Wolf. But I came from film.
Right.
And animation, and I was thinking of these stories as little movies playing out in my head, And what I realized by studying Sendak and Yuri Shulvitz and a few other amazing author-illustrators was that they treated the book as a play. So it was like theater, right? You have your stage, and your characters come onto the stage, they act out what they're going to do, they exit stage, they always exit to the stage right, so that you follow them from page to the next page.
That's true. I never thought about that.
So that the backgrounds and these visual camera angles and all that become noise that get in the way of telling the story, unless it's really important to the story. It also harkens back to, television in a way. When we were kids watching TV, it was a single camera. It didn't move. It was like, whatever you were watching, I Love Lucy, whatever. It was a single camera. The characters walked on stage. They acted out their thing. They exited stage. And today's media is just,
everywhere.
Explosions and like special effects, and it's just fast editing and cutting and zooming around, and cameras that are just moving all the time. And it's very chaotic.
Yeah, it's
hard to
this
follow
is kind of blowing my mind a little bit right now, because you're so right, and I'd never thought of this way before.
Yeah, so take a look at like Hector Protector. That was one that just kind of opened me up, because that one actually looks like a theater set. And you'll watch, Hector Protector dressed all in green. Hector Protector was sent to the queen. Like him, the king nor did the king. Hector Protector was sent home again. And he takes that story, and the boy leaves home, dressed all in green, with a cake for the queen. He gets to the castle. They don't like him. They send him home. He continues moving from left to right, and he somehow makes it back home without marching all the way around the world. So it didn't matter to the reader that that's what's happening, because you're turning the page. You're seeing where he's going. He's not going to turn around and start walking the other way, and then what are you going to do? Start turning the pages backwards?
Right.
So that was a big aha moment for me, and I ended up redoing the whole book dummy for Blackout with that in mind.
Wow.
Flattening everything out. I had all these drawings of like deep space, the difference between flat space and deep space.
Well, explain it to me a little bit,
Okay.
and for anybody who's not an illustrator.
I'll explain it to you.
Okay, thanks.
Say you have two characters, which we'll call these two pens.
Mm-hmm.
If they're acting out a scene, and this is our
Right.
stage. This is flat space.
Okay.
And this,
right,
is deep space.
Okay.
Deep space is very cinematic.
I'm very glad that you explained that to me, because I was picturing you looking down
space.
at the city from space.
That's another way of looking at it. But if you look at Blackout and you turn to the very beginning, you see the street. You'll see that it's almost like a set.
Yep.
Right, that you might see in a theater.
And
then we sort of move into that set,
Mm-hmm.
into those four windows.
Right.
And it was using the graphic space of those four windows to show how this family was sort of disparate. They're separated.
Yeah.
And then at the end, they come together and they're all in one window. And that was kind of the heart of the story. What is it going to take to get this family to kind of come together and be together?
This is why I just love picture books so much, obviously. But there's so much going on that you don't even realize. Even as a creator of picture books, the circular ending is both in the text and the visual. We know through the story what happened, the blackout, and everybody had to come together and whatnot. They made a choice to then turn the lights off again. But if all you did was looked at the first picture and then you go to the last picture, that's kind of the whole story arc right there. In a way, like you said, that's the heart of the story, is the loneliness and then the coming together. It's amazing. But that's all. There are no words on the first page or the last page. That's the visual story that you're getting to match the text. So
for a long time, there was no words in the entire book. I had done maybe 9 book dummies trying to work this story out, and the first 8 didn't have any words at all. I was trying to make it work as a wordless book, and then I realized I think it would be stronger with words sort of sprinkled in here and there to kind of lead you on, and I also wanted to use them as sort of a cadence tool. I wanted that time of rest, and then I wanted the time of something more sporadic happening. And so it was nice in that book to be able to even place the words in a way that gave people pregnant pauses and stuff as they read it, so like the lights went out.
Mm-hmm. I know, that's my favorite part.
Sometimes it all just comes together and works, but a lot of it's just about simplifying, because I'm learning that picture books, they're a sliver almost of a story,
mm-hmm.
in a way. They're a moment, and they're extended to 32 pages that work.
Right.
And that's the challenge, and I think that's the challenge we're all going to have for the rest of our lives if we continue to do this, and I think I'm going to have it for the rest of my life, and it's like finding that, it's like Bashu the fox finding that perfect haiku, Right. And it's almost impossible, and that's what I love about this field too, is it's such a perfect medium, because you have to do all of these things to boil it down to its pure essence of what it needs to be.
So true, and when it does, though, it's just magic. It makes you feel. There are picture books. I think the whole world is in this book. How did they do that? Even though it's like this tiny, like you said, this tiny little sliver. Couple questions. Do the pictures usually come first for you? Because you said this was almost going to be a wordless book, but then I will tell you that recently I looked up the word count of Blizzard.
I don't even know what it is.
I was surprised because it doesn't seem like it when you read it out loud, but it's higher than...
Yeah, I know it's higher than Blackout.
But Blackout's like 50 words. I think it ended up being 700 something, which is
really
above what people, say, try to keep it to 500 words or less. There's not an excess of words here. That's not what I'm saying. Because like I said, I was really surprised to find that the reason I was looking this up, it wasn't just your book, it was a whole bunch of books that were on the ALA notables list this year. People asked me the question, are word counts really, really that short? Are they really, really? And they really, really are. What you find is that 8 out of 10 books have a word count of 500 words or fewer, but then there are the exceptions, and they're beautiful books. But the reason I bring it up is because you started with Blackout as trying to make it wordless and then added a few words, and then Blizzard has quite a few more words, but still, this amazing visual journey. And so I'm prompted to ask then, which tends to come first, the illustrations or the text, and does it change book by book?
A lot of times, it's not the text for me that comes first, it's the story. So the story is what I'll try to write, because that's writing for me is a lot faster than drawing. So I will just write something down which describes the story. It may not be the actual words that will be in the story, but it'll be the story itself. And then I'll also at the same time have these images that are kind of flashing in my brain, wanting to be drawn. And those will start coming out. And then I'll start piecing it together, doing thumbnails and coming up with the words. And it's sort of a simultaneous dance, I'll write some words, then I'll draw a picture, and then I'll be like, oh, well, if I have that in the picture, I don't need those words, and I can take them away. And so there's a lot more freedom to actually writing and illustrating. But speaking to your point about word count, here's my feeling on all this. Children's books in general, and it's starting to change a little bit now, but it was starting to become very homogenized. And what I mean was publishers wanted to publish 32-page books that were exactly 8 by 11.5 inches, and they had 500 words in them, and they had this happening and this happening and this happening, and that was like the perfect magical kind of formula. Everybody started making books that fed into that formula because they wanted to get published, right? And I think it's still a good idea to kind of fall within that certain range, but I also feel like if you looked back 30 years ago, books, they were just good books being made, and it didn't matter how many words or how many pages or how big or little it was. It was just like, this is a good book. And I think we're moving back towards that a little bit. I mean, you look at like Brian Floca's Locomotive. I think it's 64 pages. So it's actually like 2 picture books.
Yeah, I know. Imagine the freedom.
It's got a lot of text.
Yeah.
And it's a long story, but it's like a perfect book. And I'm biased because I got to watch him make it. We shared a studio, and so I got to see him over the years working on this book. You can look back at some amazing books of yesteryear and go, this would never get published today. And that's kind of sad, when you find that wonderful book that you're like, oh man, this was such a great book. I don't think it would get published today. I know we have a book my daughter and I love called The Sign on Rosie's Door by Sendak. And it's amazing. And it's just a strange format. It's like 4 chapters, maybe 100 words per chapter, if that. Lots of pictures. It's almost like a chapter book that wants to be a picture book. And there's no place in the store for it. Or what,
right. Well, I mean, yeah, except like, then there's Bink and Golly, which was kind of like that. Kate DiCamillo.
Yes. Yeah, that sort of broke molds. I think a lot of the Mo Willems broke some molds with his Elephant and Piggy book. Not so much breaking molds, but going back to a mold that worked that sort of died away for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Those easy reader type books, that were sort of gone. You couldn't find them, so everyone was still buying Go Dog Go and One Fish, Two Fish, Red Fish, Blue Fish, and things like that. But no one was making books like that for a long, long time.
Yeah, now we have great
think
ones.
about the slant book, the book that's kind of on a slant there.
Yeah.
It's in a car and everything's rolling away.
Yeah.
I mean,
really cool stuff.
Find a publisher that would do that for you today. I don't know.
Well, maybe you could. I mean, I think once you get to a certain point, don't you have a little more freedom? I mean, do you still get rejected?
Yeah, with like paper choices and, different things like that. But I think if I went in and said, yeah, I want to make a book that's, like this, and it doesn't really fit on the bookshelf, and there's all these considerations about how it's being sold and where it's going to be in the bookstore and things like that you have to consider as well. Because, again, now we're trying to stand out in a crowd, right? There's thousands of picture books published every year.
How many kind of ideas do you say start and tinker around with, and do they get abandoned, or do you always just get, this is the seminal idea I'm working on now, and move it from start to finish? And that's the first part of the question. The second part of the question is, once you've gotten to the level where you are, do you still get rejections, like either your agent or your editor's like, no way, this isn't going to publish, and you have to move on to something else?
Yes and no. Okay, so the answer to the first part of the question was, I never get rid of any ideas. I keep them all in a folder, because a good idea is a good idea. And it might be a great idea 3 years from now, when I'm ready to explore that more. And sometimes it's as little as a sentence or a drawing, a sketch. And you're like, there's something about this character or about this thing that I want to explore more, but not right now.
Right.
And so I keep all of that stuff, because ideas are precious. I don't get them every day. And good ideas are really something. And so when you get one of those and you can't stop thinking about it, and it's just banging on the back of your skull, and all of these things are coming to your mind, and constantly walking around going, oh yeah, I could do that, and then this will happen, and it all seems to be working. Those are the ones you have to say, okay, I got to work on this one right now. But sometimes I get ones that I have to save and see what happens, let them cook.
Right.
As far as rejections go, what I've done lately, because I work with the same publisher for a lot of the books that I write and illustrate, I won't even take them too far down the road. I'll just say, okay, I've got this idea, and this idea. Which are you excited about? Because I could get excited about any of them, especially if someone else is excited about it.
Right.
Right. And that's how Blackout came to be. My editor at Hyperion at the time was Namrata Tripathi, and she and I went to lunch, and I doled out like 4 or 5 different ideas, and this was for my 4th book with them. And these other ones, which I thought were just awesome, like, this is going to be a great book. So I had them all, and then I just had this throwaway idea that I threw out there and said, well, I was also thinking of doing a book about a family and a blackout. And she immediately was like, no, that's the one. Do that. So I'm forever grateful for her.
No kidding, yeah.
To go down that road, because I at the time, I didn't see myself doing a book like that. It just didn't seem like it was in my wheelhouse at all. And so you never know. You got to go down the roads and explore.
Speaking of bucking trends and things, you could make the argument that Blackout is a pretty quiet book. And, editors say it's too quiet, too this, too that. But, It's when you just get the perfect right thing, that doesn't matter.
I love quiet books.
Me too. Me too.
And what's quiet? I mean,
Well, there is a book called The Quiet Book.
Yes.
Deborah Underwood. It's funny because
Yes.
she was a featured author too, and she said, obviously, if I was paying attention to trends, I would have seen that everybody was saying, "Don't write
But she
quiet.
followed it up with the loud book.
Don't write quiet books." And I wrote a book called The Quiet Book.
Yeah, and silence can be deafening, right? To use a bad cliche, but I don't know. I really enjoy books like that. I feel that not every book has to be hitting you over the head with big wow moments. It depends on the story.
They create opportunities for kids to have introspection, and that's very important. What my kids wanted to do after I read them Blackout for the first time was to do what the family did at the end of this book. Turn off all the lights and light candles and play games, and that's what we did.
Yeah, it's surprising. I've heard that a lot, and it's neat to know that you're kind of inspiring this. If you make a book that inspires someone to want to do something beyond the book, that's pretty cool.
It is cool.
So I always feel pretty good, when I hear stuff like that. I love talking about this.
I know. The enthusiasm is contagious, and it's one thing I love about working in this business is that everybody who's doing it just loves it, and there's so much passion in it.
Have to. And if I just want to say to the 12 by 12 people, I mean, congratulations to you for even taking on the challenge of writing 12 manuscripts.
You did say when we started the call that you should do that, and then I said you could join us.
I don't know that I have the skills to do that. I mean, that's really hard, and I'm impressed.
Yeah, there are some people who.
Good for you. I mean, that's what it takes, though.
Right.
It does take that. I mean, I'm trying to balance writing and illustrating and doing lots of other things. And I suppose if I was just writing, that would be a great challenge.
Yeah, but it's a challenge. But at the same time, what I say, because I've been running it now for 4 years, and I've never written 12 manuscripts in a year, so I never even won my own challenge. But what I know for sure is that I write a lot more as a result of it because of the support and the accountability and the community and that check-in every month. And if 3 months go by, I'm thinking, geez, I'm running the darn thing. I better write something, because it's not very motivating if the leader of the thing is like, this is impossible. So, but no, it is. It's a big commitment. But I think regardless of whether they actually write all 12, everybody's writing more and working more and thinking and immersing themselves and just, stewing themselves in picture books. So with that, tell us what you have coming up next.
What I have next?
Yeah.
I have this book that I did with Todd Tarpley.
Oh.
Eat, Eat, Go to Sleep. It's a lot of fun.
What a great title.
And it's about a boy who is desperately trying to put his 3 robots. There's a spread.
Oh my goodness.
And they keep waking up and asking for things that you ask for when you're a kid, like another cup of oil.
Oh.
Have an achy sensor.
Right.
Or something, so he keeps getting woken up.
Oh wow, my sensor aches.
Sensor aches, yes. Yeah, it's beautifully written because it has this great little refrain, quiet at last, not a peep. 3 little robots are, and you turn the page, beep beep, and you're awake again. And you'll have to see the book to see how it ends, but it was so much fun to illustrate, just all the kind of robots, and I put them in this old sort of 1940s house. That is coming out in September. And as far as writing a new picture book goes, I'm working on it. I'm in that stage where I've got like 4 or 5 ideas. I'm trying to figure out which one's going to come to the surface, which one's like wants to be written, or which one wants to be published. And I don't know. I also just finished Percy Jackson's.
Yeah, yay!
So that went off to the printer a couple weeks ago, and that will be coming out in August.
Oh, so exciting.
So yeah, it's another big book. So when the 2 books are together, I think they'll weigh as much as a small horse.
A small horse as opposed to a large horse. You got to
Yes.
cut it off
No,
somewhere.
I think it's over 8 pounds, the two
Wow.
of them together.
Wow.
It's a hefty box set
How-
that they might put out. I was thinking they should put it out and say, if you can lift it, you can have it.
Right, like they dare you to eat a whole tub of ice cream and then you get your next one for free or
Right,
whatever.
or like the sword that you have to pull out of the store.
Right. Now I have to ask this question, which is what, as an illustrator, obviously because you do your own writing and your own projects, and so what is it when you get a manuscript like Beep Beep Go to Sleep? Presumably you get many offers. People would want to have you be the illustrator. So what inspires you as an illustrator to want to tell just half of the story?
Well, for me, it's got to work. They don't all work. When you get these manuscripts, some you're like, oh man, that totally works. I get it. I love it. And it's also the type of thing that I could see myself illustrating.
Mm-hmm.
I was an art director for 14 years. Whenever I read a manuscript, first thing that comes to mind is like, who would be the best illustrator for this job? And 99 times out of 100, it's not me. But if it's in a range that's like, oh, I could probably pull that off, then I'll be like, okay, yeah, maybe this one will do. But I'm always like, I read it and I know who could crush this manuscript. It would be perfect for this, And it's always like, oh, Peter Reynolds would do a great job at this. And oh, yeah, and this one, Sophie Blackall should totally illustrate this, or whoever it is, they just come to mind because that's what I've always done. I try to like match these words and this art would be so good together.
Right.
And so I try to keep my style or approach to the book kind of open until I really feel like this is what this book needs.
Right.
And you're not always right. You could still make a good book, but that perfect match between text and words is very uncommon.
Mm-hmm.
When you see it, you're like, that's it. That's perfect.
Yeah, you can. Which one you can't imagine it any other way.
Right. Exactly. And I think of Sick Day for Amos McGee.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a husband and wife that kind of like had this perfect marriage of text and art that worked so well together.
Okay, well, final question. What's your number one piece of advice to someone still out there working away, hasn't seen their books come to fruition yet?
Number one piece of advice I would say is know what's out there. Really read everything that's out there, everything that's being published, everything that's coming out. Read the School Library Journal newsletters and the Publisher Weekly newsletters, and then go and get the books and read reviews, and not just one review, but like if there's a book you love, go read all the reviews and see what other people resonate to about this book. Why does this book work? Take texts out of books, meaning find your favorite book that you love and you love reading and type it up as a manuscript and see what it looks like that way. Do you still love it? Maybe you don't. Maybe it was because of the art, or maybe it was because of the pacing that you loved it. So think about those things and trust that you're on the right path, and that if it hasn't been published, it's because the right person hasn't seen it. I mean, there's so many different opinions about what makes a good book. Who knows, right? There's no one person that's going to be like, this is a good book, and that is not. That manuscript has to fall into the right hand. And part of that is your job in figuring out how to get it into those right hands and editing that list down so that you're not just shotgun, sending it everywhere. And the other part is patience and determination.
Right. Just don't give up. Yep. That's it.
Is that one piece?
I think so.
That's like one big...
No, actually, that's fantastic because people say read, but I like your extra advice there. Reading reviews. I do that, but I've never thought about quite how important that is to not just know that it won an award, but to go and read what real people are saying about it and why they love it so much, because that's a big piece of it.
Yeah, and they're always, even if it's a good review, sometimes there's going to be a little but in there. And if you notice that same but come up in 4 or 5 reviews, then you kind of want to like say, oh, okay, so there was this thing that wasn't working.
Right, keep your butt out of it, in other words.
I don't know if me, like I'll read reviews of my own books, and if there's sort of a constant thing that came up across the board in 6 different reviews, they all said, oh, this part of it was not really working, it might be something to take a look at for the next book.
That's brave, though. A lot of people I know don't read reviews of their own books.
Oh, I know. It can be emotionally daunting.
Yeah.
It can like set you in a tailspin for days.
Yeah, and yet you still do it.
Because someone was just like, and this is, it's pap or whatever they say, and you're just like, hard on a plate, and you're handing it to these people, right? And they're just like,
I'm so glad people won't be able.
Tastes bitter.
There's so many big ups and big downs, long dry valleys in between, and
Absolutely. I mean, you can ask my wife. I can be an emotional wreck about this stuff, and I think when I come out of it afterwards, and I'm focused on the next book, that's the thing. Like, I have a friend. We wrote a novel together, and he just wrote a picture book, and he sent it out, and now he's like in that waiting thing, and I'm like, Jay, don't wait. Just write another book.
Right.
And if you get a call on that one, great. But just write another book because this is your destiny. You gotta go down that path. So.
Yeah, that's so true. It's hard. I have 2 books on submission right now, and I was kind of driving myself crazy for a couple weeks, and also because a few rejections came in, and it's like you said, your face starts melting, and you're like, oh my God, I'm never going to get published again. But so I just spent the whole weekend, this past weekend, writing, and there's nothing more therapeutic than that. Because it just takes you completely away from...
Yeah, write your way out of a funk.
Yeah, just because it at least temporarily creates a new frustration, which is your existing piece of work, that you have to focus on, and then...
It never goes away, that thing, so you just have to figure out how to deal with it. For me at first it was like, oh, am I going to get a book deal? And then it became, oh, am I going to get a 2-book deal? And then it became... oh, am I going to get a starred review? And then I didn't get 3 starred reviews? Yeah. What? And it escalates until I don't know what the ceiling is, like the gold medal.
I don't think there is one, yeah.
No?
Yeah.
I didn't win that. I didn't win the Hans.
Well, if you won that, then you wouldn't win it the next year, and then what,
Exactly. No, that's what I'm saying. Like, I wonder what Dan Santat's thinking right now. Like, if I don't win another one, I suck. I mean, I don't know. And so, that's part of who we are as artists.
I agree. In fact, a lot of people who will watch this interview, and there will be thousands of them, by the way, over time, not tomorrow, but...
Love you all.
Exactly. People watching, most of them will be people who are in the earlier stages and who are still working and haven't had the validation and have all that angst and frustration. And it's like the feeling of which I'm so familiar with too, we all are, is if I could just get this thing, then like the whole publishing world would become my oyster and my life would be perfect. And if I could just get the agent, if I could just get that first book deal, if I could just, this. And what I try to tell people is that everybody, no matter what level of outward success they've achieved, we're all just pulling on the same rope. And some people are further along in the rope. They have the agent, they got their first book published, but they're still just like trying to go forward, like you said.
We're in a field that a lot of people want to be in. It's like the music industry. A lot of people want to be singer-songwriters, musicians, rock stars, pop stars, whatever it is. And you just have to keep staying true to your voice and the thing that gets you excited. You got to stay true to that no matter what. And hopefully someone comes along and sees that. And I was fortunate enough to have my artwork noticed. And I was asked to illustrate a public domain story, The Boy Who Cried Wolf. Mm-hmm. And I didn't like the kid, but I wanted the job. Like, I didn't like the kid in the story, so I decided I was going to write my own story. And, I got a lot of help from the editor, but I immediately signed up for a writing course, and I started workshopping my story in the writing course, and it all kind of worked, but it was hard work, sure, and I was using a muscle I hadn't used before, so that's kind of how I broke in. But thank God for SCBWI and giving me the opportunity to even showcase my work in front of people who can make decisions like that. With an illustrator, it's a little easier because, as you just did, you can go like this, and someone can immediately have an impression of whether they like it or not. You can't immediately go like this, you know. And I've joked that I've told authors who are not illustrators, and we all send out these postcards with our artwork on it.
Right.
I always say, look, take your best line of text. I mean, can you imagine if a publisher got a postcard that just said, "Where's Papa going with that axe?"
Yeah.
Right? And then, like, contact. Or, you know, like any of those great first lines or something, and you put it on a postcard and you mail it off to an editor. I don't know if it would work. It's
There
like
are a whole bunch of editors out there right now who are going to be cursing your name because they're going to start getting all these postcards.
You're welcome.
You know. I did that once when I was first starting out. I had a little verse, but the thing is, that was 7 years ago, and I thought it was awesome, and it really wasn't.
So you're saying you had my idea 7 years before I had?
I think it works better for illustrators because you'd have to have such a great line, and how do you know?
I don't know. I mean,
it
just always intrigues me, that idea of, like, how do you get that 5-second quick, oh my gosh, have you seen this person's writing?
Actually, though, the great thing about that, and I'm going to use this forevermore in my writing from now on, is I'm going to think about all of my first sentences in my picture books and think, is this postcard material? Now that's a good exercise.
Yeah, and the last sentence.
And the last sentence.
The last sentence in a picture book's almost as important, if not more important, than the first sentence, I think.
Unless it's an image, maybe the last fold.
But it has to be that marry of the image and those 2 or 3 words that just kind of really send you off.
That is super cool. Write that down, John, because you're not going to want to forget that. And you thought of it, so I'm just telling you to write down your own thing. When you look back at your first sentences.
Just call me Ishmael.
All right, and with that, I think that is the perfect way to say the end. And thank you so much. Seriously.
Yes, good luck to everyone out there writing.
Oh, this is just incredible.
You can do it.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Seriously.
Welcome. Thanks for having me.